With us now from Washington is our CBN News political correspondent, David Brody. David, these Democrats, as Joe Manchin said, I wasn't raised that way. He talks about unity. He talks about the greatness of America. He talks about our troops. He talks about the black people receiving higher jobs and their unemployment going down and so forth. And these Democrats just sat on their hands and look sour. What do you think? Is there anything that's ever going to move those people?
No, Pat. I mean, I think the Democrats have made pretty clear that they are systematically opposed to this president since day one. And one of the things that struck me in the State of the Union is what you referred to there when Donald Trump said, and it's true, it is true, historically, right now, African-American unemployment is at its lowest rate ever. And Republicans stand up and Democrats sit on their hands. I mean, what will get them to rise? A higher unemployment rate? Would they rise for that? The whole thing is political, and it was a bit shameful. And what the Democrats, and by extension the mainstream media, don't seem to quite understand is this pro-America message, which is exactly what it was, not only resonates with the base, Trump's base, but it also resonates with those independents and those Democrats, those middle-class Americans in West Virginia and all across the country. Democrats and the media have never understood it. They still don't get it.
Well, David, this immigration thing, the president, in my opinion, has offered them more than they had ever hoped to get. The president, I mean, all these dreamers and people having a path to citizenship. What do you think? I mean, how's that going to work out?
Well, there is a sense inside the White House right now that there is not going to be any deal struck at all on DACA or immigration anytime soon. And that means that February 8th deadline we hear so much about, that's moving on. In other words, there's not going to be any immigration deal by then. Will it go into March? For sure. Will it go later than March? Most likely at this point. What the president did last night was very interesting. Of course, we know the framework is 1.7 million dreamers he wants to, in essence, legalize within 10 to 12 years. Look, that's a major concession from this White House. Democrats said 700,000. The White House said, I'll tell you what, we'll do 1.7 because, of course, 1 million more than the 700,000. These are potential dreamers that are out there as well. And yet it's just not good enough for this party. Van Jones, who was on CNN last night, actually said these words. He said, the president is selling sweet candy with poison in it. And he was referring to immigration. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world, if you want to legalize 1.7 million dreamers, how is that poisonous at all? It just seems like it's a talking point after talking point by the Democratic Party.
They've always been talking about infrastructure. If we just rebuild infrastructure, that is a Democrat program because it puts laborers to work, it puts union people to work. And yet Schumer now says they'll only cooperate if the federal government pays for all of it. How come?
Well, there are a couple things going on. Here's what Chuck Schumer knows. He believes, knowing Donald Trump for a while, that he's pretty confident that the president, if he had his druthers, wouldn't mind necessarily having the government pay for all of this as well. I mean, Donald Trump may be a culture warrior, but when it comes to fiscal economics, he's not necessarily opposed to having government foot the bill for quite a few things. Chuck Schumer knows that and is trying to get the president pushed in a certain direction. But the conservative, constitutional Republicans are not going to have any of that. And so what we have, Pat, is a $1.7 trillion infrastructure package that is going to be put forward into Congress, part of it with federal dollars, part of it with private sector dollars. The Democrats say it's a non-starter if there are any private sector dollars in it. And at this point, you're going to have 60 votes for it. And, you thought an infrastructure would be the easy lift, but there's been nothing easy at all when it comes to President Trump and these Democrats since day one, Pat.
Well, how about that nuclear option in terms of infrastructure? I mean, can't Trump ultimately get the Senate just to vote a majority and push it through? They can do that, can't they?
Well, they can. Of course, they have to pass a budget. and of course, then you get budget reconciliation rules. So there is that possibility. Having said that, the question then becomes, what do you want to use your political capital on? And the sense is that the priorities for this administration are infrastructure this year, but also immigration. And they will need 60 votes on immigration. So the question is, what do they really want to go for this year?
I think that we talked yesterday about judges, and the president mentioned that in that speech. But he has actually put in more circuit court judges than his predecessor. Again, are they going to break through log jams and force the confirmation of some of these judges that are now on hold?
There is a sense of optimism here, Pat, on that, and there's a reason why. First, let me just get to the overall macro view on this. You're right. President Trump, number 6 all time with presidents in terms of how he has nominated and appointed these judges so quickly in his term. Barack Obama came in at number 10, so President Trump would love to take credit for the fact that he beat Obama. At that. But beyond that, there's and you know the process, Pat, but not to get too much in the weeds and arcane here, but there's the blue slip process. And that's what's been holding up the situation in the Senate. Basically, a senator can issue a blue slip, meaning he disapproves of that nominee in their state. So a home state senator would have to invoke the blue slip. And typically what has happened, as you know, Pat, in the past, is that would be the end of the nomination. They wouldn't be able to really move that judge forward. But Charles Grassley, the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, says, hold on for a moment. Just because you invoke the blue slip doesn't mean I'm not going to give them a hearing. We're going to go forward anyhow, and hopefully the logjam will be broken.
All right. Give the president a grade so far. He's finished the year. What do you think?
Well, I think there are two different grades. Let's start with the evangelical grade. It's an A+, and it's off the charts, and he gets a lot of stickers and smiley faces on the report card, too. I mean, look, the evangelicals have had access. The pro-life movement is ecstatic. You can just go down the list. Neil Gorsuch. I mean, I can go on and on. And then there's the overall grade of how he's doing as president. And, you know, if you listen to the New York Times and the Washington Post, you know, they'll give him an F-. But the truth of the matter is it's probably a pretty solid B+. And what do I mean by that? He's a businessman. He doesn't know politics. He's never done this before. And I thought what was very interesting is that Jenna Browder and I were at the network anchors luncheon at the White House with the president yesterday, along with many of the other network anchors. And in essence, what he told us at that meeting was very interesting. He said, look, as president, it's much different than as being a businessman. When you are a businessman, it's all about money, and that's the bottom line. As president, you have to have heart. You have to govern with heart and compassion, and it's been a mix of the two, and it's something he didn't use the word struggle with, but he said it's something he has to contemplate and really work through, and it's a much different skill set, if you will, and it's something he's working on. He'll need God's help.
Amen. David, thank you for your insights. We appreciate it.